Hi there, everyone. Dane here. I just wanted to take a second at the top of the show to apologize for our lengthy hiatus. You know, life happens sometimes, and it gets in the way of the things you really enjoy doing. Benjamin and I really love doing this show, and we'll be releasing episodes as best as we can going forward. Thanks to everyone who's reached out over Discord or YouTube, letting us know that you missed the show. Anyway, we appreciate each and every one of you, and thank you for listening. Enjoy!
Hello, and welcome to Dispel Magic, the podcast where we overthink how the magic of D&D might shape your campaign in surprising and unexpected ways. I'm Benjamin, game designer and writer.
My name's Dane. I'm a Dungeon Master podcaster and voice actor.
So today we're breaking the format a bit. We won't be covering a spell or magic item or monster or core class as usual. We're going to be talking about the Thaumaturge class, which is a class that I wrote. You can find it for free on my blog at sterlingberman.com. You can also buy it if you want the full thing. But I wanted to bring in the Thaumaturge class because it's an example of how if you aren't totally satisfied with sort of the fictional repercussions of magic in D&D, you can tweak that. You can introduce third-party classes, or you can even homebrew your own stuff. I strongly encourage everybody to add to the game. That's one of my favorite things about D&D and always has been.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this episode not only because it is a big commercial for Benjamin, but also because it kind of gets into how you can make a homebrew work for you. Or homebrew the spells that are already there.
Right, yeah. I want to talk about everything today from like just small changes that require almost no work, just like a little bit of creativity, to stuff that require a lot of design work. But anyway, let's get stuck into the class. We'll start by talking about the class, and then we're going to shift into talking about spells. But when we talk about the class, the thing I want to focus on really is how the class expands what magic can be in Dungeons & Dragons.
Yeah, it's got more of a mystical edge to it.
Dane, would you mind reading the Playing a Thaumaturge section?
The Thaumaturge is a spellcasting class with 3 notable features. Flexible spell list, so instead of learning or preparing spells from a predetermined spell list, a Thaumaturge chooses which spell schools they learn spells from. They can overcast a spell. A Thaumaturge can overcast spells to either cast a spell as if they had expended a higher spell slot, or cast 2 lower-level spells with the same spell slot in action. They also have a spellcraft feature. A Thaumaturge's subclass, called a Mystic Custom, grants them a unique spellcraft feature that provides additional benefits when a Thaumaturge casts a spell using a spell slot.
Beautifully put, Dane.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Tell me a little bit why you decided you wanted to make a class like this.
Yeah, so there were two kind of goals I had in mind. One is that when I made the Thaumaturge class, one design goal was to make an Archmage class, but that was still balanced against other spellcasters. So somebody who's kind of like an spellcaster, like the most flexible or powerful or whatever, but somehow fitted into being balanced with other classes. But really the big impetus behind creating the class is that I felt like magic was a little too sterile in D&D. All spells work the same no matter who casts them. Magic is really sanitized, right? Like you're never, like very rarely are you sacrificing anything of value. I mean, sometimes things of gold piece value, but like there's not a lot of, it's not weird. It's not esoteric.
When things going wrong just means it doesn't happen. It's not like, magic gone awry or anything like that.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You can't like accidentally do something that you didn't mean to do with magic. It either works or it doesn't work, but there's not a third thing that can happen. So I wanted to make magic a little bit messier, a little bit less predictable, a little bit more customized. One of the ways I did that is you mentioned overcasting spells, and so they can cast a spell, and then when they use this feature, it lets them cast it as if it were a spell slot level higher. So in D&D, there's no 10th level spell slots, but the Thaumaturge can kind of force one to exist. And so I did write 10th level spells for this.
Ooh, that's fun.
Which was one way of expanding what magic is capable of. And that was a real design challenge because Wish, which we covered already, is a 9th level spell and basically does anything you want. So I had to create a set of spells that were even more powerful than Wish. Which was cool.
Did you
and hard.
upscale Wish, or you're saying you made a whole bunch of new spells?
There are 16, maybe 17 new 10th level spells.
Gotcha.
In this, but it just like Wish was the kind of the baseline. Like whatever I wrote had to be better than something you could consistently do with the spell Wish.
Cooler, more effective, more dangerous. Yeah.
Right. But then getting to that point that I mentioned about how everybody casts spells the same and it just kind of all works the same. The other feature I want to touch on with the Thaumaturge is the spellcraft feature, which is that every Thaumaturge has a Mystic Custom. And your Mystic Custom is something like Crystalmancy or Oneromancy, which is dream magic, Cartomancy, which is card magic. And so whenever you cast a spell, you're using an implement from your Mystic Custom. Like for the Cartomancer, obviously you're using a deck of cards. For the Oneromancer, the dream magic one, you're using either a book of lullabies or a stuffed animal or a pillow or a blanket. And in every spell you cast is flavored by your Mystic Custom. So when you're an Oneromancer, the world becomes dreamlike around you, and there's a bunch of like random effects that you're rolling for on a table. And when you're a Cartomancer, you actually you can draw cards or roll to simulate drawing cards, and those have different effects every single time you cast a spell. So every time you cast a spell, there's the spell happening, but then there's some magical thing about you that gets triggered too.
Like a more focused wild magic table, maybe.
For some of them, it's for sure like that. For others, it's very, you always know what you're going to get when you cast a spell. It's just like this kind of second resource you get when you cast a spell. I guess now that I've kind of gone into it a bit, there's this other secondary design idea I had that in D&D, or rather real world magical traditions are not very well represented in D&D, right? Like a lot of the stuff that people have done across various different cultures, believing they were divining the future or working magic or whatever else, is just not something that shows up in D&D. And so that's why I wanted to put in things like reading tarot cards as a way of casting magic, or interpreting dreams, or wielding crystals, that kind of thing.
Well, more interesting details than just you have a magic wand or a glowing stone.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's just injecting some real-world folklore, I guess, into the setting and making it... And I think that's another way in which it becomes less sterile. Like, it's less like you learn it all from a book, which sounds a lot like magic is just science. And it's more like the way you approach magic influences how you work it. If you wanted to include similar ideas in your campaign, I think there's a few ways you could do that. One way is that you could make, and Dan, you brought up wands and orbs. One way you could do that, I think, is by making the spellcasting foci matter. Like, wizard gets, wand, orb, I think 2 or 3 other things. I don't think they do get a tome.
No, that's just your spellcasting book. That's like your book of spells, right?
Anyway, at least a wand and an orb. And then, like, priests get a holy symbol and maybe something else, and druids get a couple options. But that's all flavor. You make that choice once, and then in most games it never comes up again. But you could do something in your home game where your spellcasting foci matters. Like, maybe if you're casting evocation spells, they're more potent if you use a wand, or they're more accurate if you use a wand. But if you're focused on divination spells, you're going to want to bust out your orb so you can ponder it.
Gotta ponder. If you're going to orb, you gotta ponder.
Always be pondering.
ABP. Well, I like the idea of different spellcasting focuses doing better in certain situations or others. Almost like you've got a collection of spellcasting focuses where
right, yeah,
you wanna do better at something. So it's kind of combining the fun of a material pouch without the arduous nature of a material pouch, right? Because with a material pouch, you want to be like, oh, I take out my powdered gemstones and I blow them in the air. But then you have to remember to get those powdered gemstones later, and you have to remember to collect all the stuff. So with this, you just have the things. They don't get used up, but you still get a little bit of flavor out of them, which is a lot of fun.
I think it's a cool idea that would be pretty easy to just make a few different minute changes for each one and run with it. And the good thing about making these kinds of changes in your home game is that if you find that you've made something too strong or too weak, you just fix it for the next time you play, and you keep trying. Another idea I had is that wizards start the game with 8 spells in their spell book. They can only prepare maybe 3 or something. I can't remember. They can only prepare a subset of that every day. But since the kind of fiction of wizards is that they attend universities or schools, I thought it would be cool if schools basically taught all their graduates the same 8 spells. Like, so you knew what school a wizard graduated from based on the spells in their spell book. I don't think it has to be entirely 8. Like, it could be 6 just so that you've got it, or 5 maybe, so you've got a couple to like choose from yourself. But I thought it would be cool if wizarding school just generally, kind of like how you have to have like a certain number of math credits, a certain number of humanity credits, all that kind of stuff to graduate with an undergrad degree. It's the same kind of idea, but with spells.
You got to have a certain amount of divination before you even can wield that crystal ball.
Well, we talked before about like company magic schools. Like if you wanted to train to become like you're a miner, but you want to go to night school to get Tensor's floating discs so you can be a Tensor's floating train operator. And so like maybe one of these is just a trade school where you just learn all these kind of like low level kind of industry supporting spells. And that could be fun too, because then different wizard schools have different kind of stereotypes of one another. Like, oh, you guys learn Tensor's floating disc and invisible, what is it? Invisible servant?
Yeah.
Learn Tensor's floating disc and unseen servant. All you do is
that's so menial.
Labor stuff.
Yeah. Ugh.
Yeah, so menial.
I'm surprised your brains don't get dirty from all the grounds.
Secondhand work that's happening as a result of your spellcasting.
Can you have calloused eyeballs? Calloused thoughts, maybe? You can have calloused thoughts. But...
Calloused thoughts. Wow.
Is that a new spell for you, Benjamin?
It might be. I don't know if it
Just
deals
too
psychic
thick.
damage or makes you resistant to psychic damage.
And then you have blistered thoughts. Woo! Gross.
Very gross.
I think a lot of games do this, but they really spell it out in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, where you can aesthetically reskin your spells. So, you know, if you are a Triton and you are casting Swarm or something, it's little sand fleas that come out, or a whole bunch of tiny little spectral piranha. A way to make your game your own, or let your players feel ownership over their own character.
Yeah, that's a really cool idea. You saying Triton got me thinking about a lot of spells that you could retheme, and it made me think of like a were-shark that when they cast Fog Cloud, it's like kind of blood in the air.
Oh, damn.
There's kind of iron smell.
Like blood in the water, but it's just like cloudy blood in the air. Ooh,
yeah.
Creepy.
So just little changes like that, which the cool thing about that is that it requires no design stuff at all. It's just you're just reflavoring a spell to your character, which I think is weird that I have not often done that when I've played D&D. But I think it's really cool, especially on attack spells where you've got a lot of opportunity to create some visual flair that like might spice up combat or make things a little more interesting for a moment at least. I think in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, there's a picture of a spellcaster casting magic missile, and it's like phantasmal chickens. It's either that or I had the craziest dream of my life, but I'm pretty sure that that's a picture in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything.
I had a player do magic missile where the missiles were chain chomps, but musical notes.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And ice daggers and things like that. Yeah.
I really like that because then if you had like a keyboard or something at the table, you can be like magic missiles, like 3 different hits. You can kind of either do like a chord or like play them in sequence. That's a fun idea.
Dun, dun, dun. Dead.
But if you're like me, you don't want to just stick with those kind of surface level changes. You do want to dig in and do some design work. And that's where I think there's plenty of opportunity to create new feats or backgrounds that represent specific magical traditions or institutions that players can learn magic from. So there's sort of like no limit to what you can do if that's what you're interested in introducing to your game. You can have feats that maybe different foci don't do anything on their own, but when you take a feat, you can, like, there are feats that let you specialize in weapon types, but there's no feat that lets you specialize in spell focuses. That seems like a cool way to expand the game.
There should be.
Yeah. What gives?
Let's make it happen.
Let's make it happen. It's a great idea. Actually, might have done that before and just forgot.
Somewhere deep in your Google Drive.
Google Drive, yeah. So another lesson learned, I guess, or explored when I was writing the Thaumaturge class, I created a lot of new spells, and a few of them referenced things I'd either written for other projects or had used in my own games. So those 2 spells are Zildrahar's Ravenous Maw and Through Lemuria's Gates. Dane, could you briefly summarize Zildrahar's Ravenous Maw?
Sure. It's a really interesting spell. When you cast this spell, you can call forth a sliver of the end of all things. And end of all things is capitalized. It's a proper noun. It takes the form of a ravenous maw of feathers and bone. Whatever that means in your brain. Essentially what this sliver, this maw does is it inhales creatures and it will erase the memory of that creature in the world if it kills that creature. If you listen to the Adventure Zone, they have a similar thing with what they call void fish. In this situation, that person no longer exists and nobody remembers that they exist. And on top of that, this creepy bird thing, this bone bird hunger hole, also recites facts about the end of the world in a unsettling way.
Oh, does it? That's so funny. I haven't read the spell in a while. That's really good.
That's good. That's good stuff.
I project managed a book several years back called Infamous Adversaries, and each chapter was just like a boss monster, basically. So it's sort of like very short adventures. It didn't spell everything out for you, but it gave you a boss monster, what the boss is planning on doing, the layer, stuff you got from beating the boss, all that kind of stuff. And
sounds like a good book. We should do an episode on that.
Let's not. But this is kind of pulling double duty because Zildrahar is in that book. He's the highest CR monster in the book, and it was written to kind of be like a campaign finale. Like if you beat Zildrahar, like that's it. Like Zildrahar is the end made manifest. Yeah. And I had the kind of idea for the spell about like this thing that's kind of maybe erasing you from the, like it's hurting you, but also if it kills you, it erases you from the world. So like people aren't going to even think to raise you from the dead because they don't remember you ever existed.
Oof.
And I liked the tie-in, and I guess I'm bringing this up because, or I want to dig into that because it's kind of trivially easy to either create new spells or change ones that already existed to introduce historical or setting important figures into your story, into your game.
It also justifies a wizard knowing so much about the world, right? Like if these spells are intrinsic to world events, then that naturally integrates history proficiency and nature proficiency and things like that.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, the way I think of these is that this spell and Through Lemuria's Gates is that these are lore dump spells. Like just by your player picking the spell, I feel like players hate learning homebrew settings.
Yeah.
I have spent untold hours writing page upon page upon page of backstory and history and setting details for settings that I am sure no one has ever read. Like, even though I've handed it out at like every starter session and asked them to like read it or familiarize themselves with it, like I know players aren't reading that stuff. But this is a good way of getting people to kind of learn a little bit about your setting just by making their character, just by leveling up when they're like, oh, this cool new spell. Yeah, exactly. Which I think is probably, I don't know of any other way to consistently get the players buy-in, right? Like, unless it's about them, like, why are they going to spend the time to learn it?
Maybe like gummy treats, like gummy bears. Maybe you give out gummy bears or...
Right, okay, sure. Yeah, like you could do kind of a trivia night thing about your own setting and hand out gummy bears for people who get the correct answers. That's actually not a bad idea.
No joke. I did run a session like that towards the end of my homebrew game where they all had to like come up with answers from what they've done. It was they had to save an NBC that was really important, and to do that they had to answer these questions correctly. It's a good session.
That's good. Yeah, that sounds like a good session. I actually don't think that sounds all too bad either. I mean,
no, it was fun. We had fun.
Yeah.
They set it free. It was great. There's also how do you say it?
Lemuria.
Oh,
yeah.
Sorry. Yeah. Through Lemuria's gates. It's essentially a sliding doors situation where you, the player, get to play as a different version of yourself. So any part of your character can be changed. All the parts of your character can be changed. And I imagine you like hold on to your same basic personality, but you know, it's really mixing things up.
Yeah, so basically Through Lemuria's Gates lets you create a whole new character from scratch and play as that guy for a while, which is pretty daunting because it's a 9th level spell, so that means you're at least 17th level, so you're going to create a new 17th level character from scratch every time you cast the spell, if you wish.
I just imagine the person with a pile of papers next to them and just taking off the top.
Yeah.
Either that or everyone sits there for 2 hours and waits for the person to create their character in real time. Also,
as the game designer, I didn't have to worry about that, but now that we're talking about it, yes, that sounds really horrible.
The DM's like, no, this has to be truly random. Do it here in front of us so we know.
Especially because the casting time is 1 bonus action. It probably should have been something like 8 hours, so that at least it was happening over a long rest, so that like everybody else could be doing things with their character sheet while you're creating a new 17th plus level character. Anyway,
Jesus,
I wanted.
What if they multi-class? Oh no.
Well, it depends. As long as the multi-class isn't a spellcaster, it might actually make things faster. But I wanted to highlight this because Lemuria is a concept in my homebrew campaign setting, and Lemuria is kind of it's like a magic item world type of thing where like every time any decision is made, instead of the world fracturing off into different, like instead of there being branching timelines, all of the like non-prime timelines get destroyed, but sometimes they're like the remnants of those timelines end up in Lemuria for a while until they either fade out of existence, or in the last big campaign I ran, Lemuria, all the Lemurians gathered together and tried to force their own version of reality to happen. So they were like temporal incursions across the timeline of my setting, where all these different Lemurians were trying to get their world to actually happen.
That's very Quantum Leap. Anyway,
very Quantum Leap. I like that. We're doing a throwback to like a season one reference there.
It's very Quantum Leap.
It's very Quantum Leap, but it's just another example of. I mean, I think my players were very familiar with Lemuria because they were kind of the antagonists of that entire campaign setting. But if you wanted to just drop in, oh, this like weird thing exists in my game, it kind of leaves some breadcrumbs for players to choose to explore or engage with it or not. Like maybe, like, because a lot of my campaigns won't include Lemuria, but it'll still exist in the setting. And so maybe introducing a spell like this gets people curious about what that means and if they can do something or engage with it, which is awesome. You want your players to be curious about your setting.
You got Tasha, you got Bigby, you got Mordenkainen. You make your own. Make people curious about it. You drop breadcrumbs about it, and then optimally you have inquisitive players.
Yeah, I like that you brought up that like several spells have kind of D&D character names in them already. So you can always just toss that in but like add in your own historical spellcasters like to a spell name, just to kind of pepper the world with like characters specific to like for instance, on a world where Tasha didn't exist, why would they call it Tasha's Hideous Laughter? That wouldn't make any sense, but maybe there was somebody else in your setting that does that, or maybe Healing Word is something that was founded by one specific person that everybody knows.
Everybody knows Bob healed people by saying, "Hey, it's okay." It's Bob's Healing Word.
Exactly.
Hey, Benjamin, you hear about this new RPG match?
Boy, have I.
Yeah, they're sponsoring the show this week, so you better have. It's the TTRPG matching service that allows you to browse and connect with other tabletop folks who like to play like you do, like even you do.
Huh. So you're saying if I wanted to find someone to play a new game with?
Yeah, RPG match.
If I wanted to meet someone who will actually show up on time?
Yeah, you just go to RPG match.
What if I want to play with people as excited about world building as I am?
Well, Benjamin, and we all know you're so passionate about world building, I would go to RPG Match. Now, if they want a super political campaign that's mostly social machinations, they should probably go to RPG Match and find you.
Compliment accepted.
When you go to RPG Match, they ask important questions like what your safety tools are, what you think about character death, and different stylistic things so that you're guaranteed to have a good fit before you sit down at the table or your virtual tabletop, the VTT.
RPG Match is also partnering with major publishers, from Chaosium to Free League to Paizo and more, to allow you to unlock special badges.
RPG Match is more than just a matching service, Benjamin. Okay, I can hear it in your voice that you think that they're just a matching service, but they're not.
Guilty.
They're building an online community from the ground up. That's hard to do. They've got tabletop gamers in mind. And are you ready for the best part, Benjamin?
Lay it on me.
It's free.
All of it.
Every part. Just for the listeners, Benjamin just took the palm and he hit it on his forehead like, oh, why didn't I think of that?
Sunshine, canoeing, summoning extra-dimensional horrors. These are all my favorite things that I remember about my summers as a kid. Hi, I'm Thaumaturge, and I want to invite you to my all-ages summer camp, Lake Endless Ponder. No matter what level you are, you can learn and grow into the best archmage you can be at our camp. Join us for activities like spell arts and crafts. Decorate and personalize your own invocations. Mindfulness and focuses. Find what arcane tools help channel your dark machinations while practicing everyday mindfulness and self-care. And at the end of the summer, compete alongside your fellow campers in the Magicus Ultimus Jamboree, where we go toe-to-toe and wand-to-wand against those lamos at Camp Illustro in a series of escalating magic tests, culminating in an all-out wizard war. Those left living say it's their favorite part every year, and it can be yours too. I'm Grand High Archmage Thaumaturge. Come ponder with us this summer.
Adding kind of your own settings, spellcaster names, I think is one great way. Another one is just to rename existing spells. One idea I had is that instead of calling the spell Raise Dead, you might rename it to Sunder the Leaden Gates. And so this, maybe even add a few kind of fluff sentences at the start. But basically, instead of, like, raise dead just sounds like a person's dead, and then you bring them back to life. The spell name kind of suggests that it's just that simple. By changing it to Sunder the Leaden Gates, it's like, oh, well, what is the fiction of what's happening here? And maybe the fiction is that when you cast the spell, you're literally breaking open the gates to the underworld to steal back someone who's supposed to be dead and bring them to the land of the living. And that opens up a ton of potential storylines.
The fact of the matter is, the more like lore baked into your story, the deeper your world feels. So any of these changes is just going to make the entire world feel more lived in.
Right, exactly. To go back and reuse a phrase I said earlier, it's just a lot of the magic in D&D is very sterile. Raise dead. It's dead, and now it's not. But, like, where's the action in that? Like, it's much cooler to piss off the god of the underworld by breaking into his domain and stealing your friend back and bringing them back to life than it is to just say he was dead and now he's not.
And then
so I think
that's a whole plot hook on its own, right?
Right.
You've sundered the Leaden Gates, and now you're going to incur whatever god of the dead's wrath. Like, you ruined my gate. You owe me a gate.
Yeah, and if you really wanted to go hard on that, you can make very small changes to spells. Like it maybe everybody who's ever been brought back to life with Sunder the Leaden Gates has an invisible mark on them that can only be seen with Detect Magic or True Sight, and it's just there's a lead coin on their forehead or over their eyes, maybe. Like, that just indicates that they're meant to be in the land of the dead, but they've been brought back here for some reason.
And that could go in the spell description, right? You can put you can add this flavor text into this spell so that it's not just the same old. Get those players reading their spell descriptions again.
Yeah, I will say preparing for this episode just made me think about how if you spent like an hour or two going through and finding a lot of the kind of basic spells that everybody wants to take and tinkering with them a little bit to figure out how they might drop lore about your setting, I think that's kind of the most bang for your buck, probably, in terms of like anything we're talking about today in terms of how to make spells or player options interesting.
Honestly, I would do it after they make their characters and they've picked their spells. So I go through.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I think it would be a little more. It would be less daunting for me. So if I see what spells they already have.
Oh, right. Okay. Because otherwise you might be doing work that doesn't pay off. Yeah.
I'm a very lazy man, Benjamin. I don't want to do extra work. So
Right.
I would go through their spell sheets and be like, hey, y'all, I updated your spells. There might be some difference from the boilerplate stuff. If you want to explore that, you may find out more about the world. But, that's up for you. Whatever.
See, I'd be worried that would be like that people would read that, feel like that's a bit of a gotcha or something. Like if I picked my spell based on the description that I read in the player's handbook or online or whatever, and then it changed. I mean, if it's just an aesthetic change, probably not. But if it's just an aesthetic change, I feel like they're still just going to go on D&D Beyond or whatever and read the spell description and never ever look at your version of it. So if you don't,
I guess that's a
change
session 0 thing. You'd be like, hey,
yeah.
I have this idea. I want to do this. Does everybody trust me to not screw you over once you pick spells? Right. Consent's important, Benjamin.
Of ultimate importance. Yeah. And I mean, I think it really matters to players to have control over the identity of their own character. And it does not feel good. I've been in situations where a DM like told me that something that they didn't like the way something worked, like one of my abilities worked, and so it just wasn't going to work that way. And that's kind of like no way to pull me out of a game faster than to just be like, okay, so
here's all your agency.
Whatever
the
you
rules don't
make
matter.
up in the mind, then I don't know what we're doing.
Just playing Calvin Ball.
Yeah.
Well, I brought up Quantum Leap earlier. We've talked about a lot of spells on this show in the past. We've talked about both how we'd wish a spell would work, right? And we've also talked about how different spells interact with each other. And you've listed a couple spells here that, at least one, I feel, was directly inspired by an episode.
Yeah. So we're gonna wrap up by just talking about a few of the spells in the Thaumaturge class that kind of interact with previous episodes. The first one is Imbue Sentience, which is
Everything's alive.
Yeah, if you've heard the Awaken episode, it's just Awaken, but for objects. So
You want your house to talk? You got it.
there's a size. Is this really just? It's a 7th level spell, so maybe there isn't a size limit. Can
Listen,
you make a house talk?
I sure hope so, because that's what I want.
Yeah, no, there's no size limit. Yeah, so you can make your house talk.
Wunderbar. Uh-oh, can you make the planet talk? Uh-oh.
That's a good question. I guess
Oh, no.
you can. Although, is there any? No, I think you can't because like otherwise, if the planet is an object, that means that it's got an armor class and a set number of hit points.
I was going to say.
And that you could start hitting it and you could destroy the planet by doing enough hit point damage to it, which seems like probably inaccurate.
The world's constitution score is 14, you see.
Yeah.
Anyway,
so I wanted to highlight this because in Speak with Animals and the Awaken episode, we talk about the kind of philosophical or moral challenges of non-human personhood. So when beasts and plants are also people, how does that change? I don't know, humans is a weird word to use, but how does that change humanoids' relationships with beasts and plants when they're not people too? Because they could be people. Like someone could awaken that thing could awaken that tree or that dog in the future, and then it's a person now. So how do I interact with it? And so now that's true of objects too.
Just really making everything more complicated.
Right. I mean, to say nothing of, I feel like we used to talk about this more often than we have recently, but to say nothing of how much this would change, affect the legal system.
No, yeah.
Like, are the rules the same for humanoids versus awakened beasts versus awakened plants versus awakened objects?
For one thing, graffiti would be a much higher level crime.
Well, unless that's awakened objects versions of tattoos.
Well, then you pay the person. That's what I'm saying. Like graffitiing, like I'm not just going to walk up to a dude's face and put my name on his cheek.
Right.
That's assault.
Oh, that's pretty fun. That's a funny idea, though.
Thank you. Yeah, and objects have no lifespan, so the first objects ever targeted by the spell may be old enough to have witnessed history, long enough that, like, mortals, even elves, who can live for a really long time, but even the elves have forgotten. So you cast Imbue Sentience on a boulder, you're gonna hear some wild stuff.
Yeah, I don't know if you cast Imbue Sentience on a boulder, if it remembers everything from the time where it wasn't.
That's true. Everything
awakened,
kind of.
But if you cast it, and then that boulder is still around in 6,000 years, then yeah. And we kind of got into this.
Saying.
We kind of got into this in the Awaken spell episode about how redwood trees might be like archdruids in most settings, where they're the ones who trains druids because they've been around so long and have seen so much and have had time to master kind of being a druid themselves, that they might be like all the kind of high level druids might be them. But yeah, that goes double when you've got objects with no lifespan, like a house or a boulder. Another spell that I wanted to touch on was Steel Voice.
It does pretty much what you think it would do. You take the voice of somebody else. You can speak as they do. They can try and resist against it, but you're pulling an Ursula.
You're pulling an Ursula. When I was thinking about this episode, this really made me think of Magic Mouth and how a big limitation of Magic Mouth. Well, we had a lot of very weird ideas about Magic Mouth that didn't matter for anything except for building supercomputers. But another idea we had is the idea of making records. And the problem with Magic Mouth for that is that unless you're a good singer or good orator, who cares? Because Magic Mouth reproduces your own kind of words in your own voice.
You got to be a bard for that. But with this,
Right, exactly. Yeah, that's what we talked about. Yeah.
you can be making albums, and it becomes a lot more feasible for one person, right? To be able to do these Magic Mouth albums.
I almost hate to think about it, but I feel like in D&D settings with Steel Voice and Magic Mouth, a cappella albums would be very
Very popular.
which is awful.
Where in the world is Carmen Sandiego? Everybody would love
okay,
it.
you can't cite the one most beloved a cappella song because that's nobody thinks of Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego and thinks I want less of that. But everybody can remember a time where they've had to listen to a college a cappella thing.
Right. It's Sweet Child of Mine. It's Welcome to the Jungle.
Have you seriously heard somebody sing Welcome to the Jungle in an a cappella context?
No, but I kind of want to now.
Okay. Anyway, yeah, so Steel Voice and Magic Mouth lets you do that. Then the last spell I wanted to touch on before we wrap up is Instant Inventory.
You know what everything is in one spot. I know everything that's here.
Yeah, it's pretty straightforward. Instant Inventory lets you take instant inventory of the things within 30 feet.
Bureaucracy, the spell.
It's funny because I think I wrote this spell about the time we recorded the Demiplane episode. And the way so with Demiplane, you can either create a new Demiplane or you can go to a Demiplane that already exists as long as you know everything that's on that Demiplane. And so I think I wrote the spell specifically to facilitate...
To interact with Demiplane.
To facilitate the kind of warehouse or stealing from Demiplane warehouses idea that we kind of talked about in that episode.
And, I saw in your book that there's also a 10th level spell called Demiplane True that works as you would wish a Demiplane would work. You actually make a Demiplane. You actually make another plane of existence instead of just this pocket room.
I don't know how much time in the Demiplane episode we dedicated to talking about my disappointment at what the Demiplane spell was.
Probably 5 minutes, I'd say. I mean,
but when I think of Demiplane, I think of your own pocket world. I don't think of a 30 by 30 wood paneled room that you stuff stuff into.
Well, again, it's sanitized. It's no, don't go there. Oh, no. Oh, you wanted this to be fun? It's just going to be kind of cool.
Although I will say, I guess if we're going to say something in defense of the way these spells are written, I wrote through Lemuria's Gates, which is going to take you 7 hours of real time to actually work out what to do. And
everybody
least
loves making characters, Benjamin. That's the best part of the game.
They do, but I don't think anybody likes sitting there and watching somebody else make a character while nothing happens in the game. Right?
I mean, it depends on what's on TV, I guess.
I might be right.
Hey, everybody. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the Thaumaturge class written by somebody named Benjamin Huffman. Maybe you should look him up sometime. Made a really cool class called the Pugilist. If you've got any ideas about how any of this stuff could work, will work in your campaigns, please let us know by emailing us. The email address is dispelmagicpodcast@gmail.com.
Thanks so much for listening. We'll see you again after your next long rest.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of Dispel Magic. If this has inspired any ideas for your game, or you have another take on today's topic, please let us know on Twitter @DispelMagicPod. You can find Benjamin @SterlingVermin and Dane @DaneInDanger. Thank you to Slim Mittens for our cover art, produced by Benjamin Huffman, produced and edited by Dane Fox-McGraw.